The rain beat against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse on the day Alpha Declan Sterling banished his fated mate. Sadie was only 19, shivering in a rain-soaked coat, carrying a secret she hadn't even found the breath to tell him yet she was pregnant. Declan chose corporate dominance, marrying Victoria Croft to secure his empire, leaving Sadie to freeze in the unforgiving human world. He thought he had erased his past. He thought his legacy was bulletproof. But 18 years later, a boy with Declan's exact ice-blue eyes just walked into Sterling Enterprises, and he isn't here for a family reunion. He's here for the crown. The modern werewolf world is not run from caves or forest clearings. It is run from boardrooms. The Sterling Pack, operating out of a sprawling estate in Aspen, Colorado, controlled a multi-billion-dollar logistics and real estate empire. Declan Sterling, at 22, had just inherited the title of Alpha after his father's sudden death in a plane crash. He was grieving, overwhelmed, and completely at the mercy of the pack elders and the corporate board. Sadie Miller was an anomaly in Declan's high-stakes world. She was a lowly beta, an archivist working in the pack's historical library. She wore oversized sweaters, smelled of vanilla and old paper, and had never cared for pack politics. But the moon goddess cares little for tax brackets or social standing. When Declan and Sadie bumped into each other in the estate's grand hallway, the mating bond snapped into place with the force of a lightning strike. For 3 months, it was a secret, intoxicating romance. They met in the library after hours, making promises under the shadows of dusty tomes. Declan swore he would defy the elders. He swore she would be his Luna. But promises made in the dark rarely survive the harsh light of a boardroom. The European packs, led by the ruthless Croft family, were threatening a hostile takeover of Sterling Enterprises. The only way to secure the alliance and save his pack from financial ruin and territorial war was a political marriage to Victoria Croft. Victoria was bred to be a Luna impeccably poised, exceptionally cruel, and backed by an army of enforcers. Sadie remembered the day it ended with agonizing clarity. It was a Tuesday in late November. She had woken up feeling inexplicably nauseous, a flutter in her stomach that her wolf instinct immediately recognized. She was carrying an Alpha's air, filled with a terrifying mix of joy and panic. She rushed to Declan's private office, pushing past his bewildered secretary. She found him standing by the window, flanked by 3 pack elders and Victoria Croft, who was already wearing the Sterling family signet ring. Declan didn't even look at Sadie when he spoke. His voice was entirely devoid of the warmth she had come to know. "Sadie, you shouldn't be here. Declan, I need to talk to you. Alone." "It's urgent," she pleaded, her voice trembling as the scent of Victoria's heavily perfumed dominance filled the room, choking her. "There is nothing you can say to me that my future Luna cannot hear," Declan replied, his jaw tight. He finally turned to her, and his ice-blue eyes were utterly dead. "The elders have made their decision, and I have made mine. A beta archivist cannot lead this pack through a war. You are a liability, Sadie." Sadie's heart shattered against her ribs. She placed a hand over her flat stomach, the words "I'm pregnant" dying on her tongue. If she told him now, in front of Victoria, they would take the child. They would kill her and take her baby to be raised by a monster. Her maternal instincts flared, hot and protective. "I, Declan Sterling, Alpha of the Aspen Pack," Declan recited, the ancient words tearing through the air like shrapnel. "Reject you, Sadie Miller, as my mate and Luna." The physical pain of a rejected bond is said to be akin to having your spine ripped out. Sadie collapsed to the mahogany floor, screaming as blood poured from her nose, her wolf howling in absolute devastation inside her mind. Declan flinched, taking a half-step forward, but Victoria placed a manicured hand on his chest, stopping him. "Get her out of my sight," Victoria sneered to the guards, "and make sure she is escorted off pack lands. She is stripped of her rank, a rogue." Sadie was given 10 minutes to pack a single duffel bag. She left Aspen on a Greyhound bus bound for Portland, Oregon, with $300 in her pocket, a broken soul, and the future, Alpha, of the Sterling Pack growing in her womb. The early years in Portland were a nightmare of survival. Without a pack, a wolf's immune system weakens. Sadie battled constant illness, working grueling double shifts at a diner and later cleaning offices at night. She suppressed her wolf entirely, living completely as a human to hide her scent from wandering enforcers. But the boy whom she named Leo was entirely different. From the moment Leo was born, he was formidable. He didn't cry. He observed. By the time he was 5, he was breaking wooden chairs with his bare hands. By 12, His eyes would flash that familiar, terrifying ice blue when he was angry. Sadie exhausted herself, pouring all her meager savings into black market witch amulets to suppress Leo's scent and power, terrified that Declan or Victoria would sense him. She told Leo his father was a human who died in a car crash. She told him their extreme strength was a medical anomaly. She lied, and she lied, and she lied, all to keep him safe. But blood as powerful as Declan Sterling's cannot be hidden in the shadows forever. Present day, Portland, Oregon. 18-year-old Leo Miller wiped motor oil from his forehead, leaving a dark streak across his tanned skin. He was built like a heavyweight fighter, standing 6'3" with shoulders that seemed to stretch the fabric of his mechanic's uniform to its breaking point. Despite his imposing physical presence, Leo was a quiet storm. He was a straight-A student, a prodigy with mechanical engineering, and notoriously solitary. He knew he wasn't normal. He healed from deep cuts in seconds. His senses were so sharp he could hear the heartbeat of a stray cat hiding 3 blocks away. And then there was the anger, a primal growling beast inside his chest that constantly demanded to be let out. He loved his mother fiercely and respected her desperate pleas for him to keep a low profile, but the amulets she made him wear burned his skin, and the lies she told him chafed his soul. The turning point happened on a sweltering Thursday afternoon. Leo was closing up the auto shop alone when 3 black SUVs rolled into the lot. The men who stepped out weren't local thugs. They wore tailored Italian suits, moved in eerie synchronization, and carried an undeniable scent of pine, blood, and arrogance. They were werewolves. Specifically, they were enforcers for the Croft Syndicate, operating on the West Coast, shaking down local businesses for protection. The lead enforcer, a hulking man named Adrian, approached Leo with a predatory grin. "Where's the owner, kid?" He missed his payment to the Croft family. "He's not here," Leo said, his voice a low, vibrating rumble. The beast inside him, usually a suppressed whisper, suddenly roared to life at the scent of these men. It wasn't fear. It was absolute, unadulterated territorial rage. Adrian chuckled, stepping into Leo's personal space. "Then you'll have to pay the toll, grease monkey." He shoved Leo hard against the garage door. It was a fatal miscalculation. The cheap witch's amulet around Leo's neck snapped. In an instant, 18 years of repressed alpha aura exploded outward in a suffocating, crushing wave. The sheer pressure of it dropped 2 of the enforcers to their knees, gasping for air as their inner wolves instinctively submitted to a superior predator. Leo didn't even fully shift. His eyes bled from warm hazel to a glowing, piercing ice blue. His claws extended, slicing through the thick leather of his work gloves. Before Adrian could react, Leo's hand was wrapped around his throat, lifting the 300-pound werewolf off the ground with one arm. "Never touch me," Leo whispered, his voice distorted, layered with the terrifying timbre of an alpha command. "And never come back here." He threw Adrian halfway across the lot. The enforcers scrambled into their SUVs and sped off, terrified by the nameless rogue who possessed the aura of an ancient king. When Sadie came home that night to their small apartment, she found Leo sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. The broken pieces of the silver amulet were scattered across the table. "They found me, Mom," Leo said quietly. "Or rather, they found what I am. Men in suits. They smelled like dogs, like monsters, and I smelled like them." He looked up, his ice-blue eyes piercing through the shadows. "Who am I? And do not tell me another lie about a car crash." Sadie broke down. The 18 years of exhaustion, fear, and grief poured out of her. She went to her bedroom and dragged out a locked metal box from beneath the floorboards. She placed it in front of Leo and opened it. Inside was her old, tarnished pack medallion bearing the sterling crest, a wolf howling over a mountain peak. Next to it was a faded newspaper clipping from the financial section. Declan Sterling, CEO of Sterling Enterprises, weds Victoria Croft in merger of the decade. For hours, Sadie spoke. She told him about the werewolf world, the packs, the hierarchy. She told him about her mating bond, the rejection, and the ruthless empire his father ran. She cried as she confessed why she hid him, begging him to understand that Victoria Croft would have ordered him killed in his crib to protect her own children's claim to the empire. Leo stared at the newspaper clipping. He looked at the man in the photo, a man who shared his jawline, his hair, his exact eyes. He absorbed the betrayal not just of his mother, but of himself. He had grown up eating expired canned food while his father ruled a multi-billion-dollar empire and raised another woman's children. "He has 2 sons with her," Sadie whispered, wiping her tears. Asher and Brody. Asher is the heir. He's 19. They are powerful, Leo. They are untouchable. Leo picked up the heavy sterling medallion, his thumb tracing the embossed wolf. A cold, calculated calm washed over him. The feral rage from the auto shop had receded, replaced by something much more dangerous: ambition. "No one is untouchable, Mom," Leo said, his voice eerily smooth. "Leo, please." Sadie grabbed his hand, terrified by the look in his eyes. "We have to pack. We have to run. The Croft enforcers will report your aura. They'll look for you." "Let them," Leo said, standing up. He walked over to his laptop and opened it, typing Sterling Enterprises into the search bar. Images of skyscrapers, elite academies, and pack holdings flooded the screen. He saw an advertisement for the Sterling Academy, an elite, pack-run university in Colorado that groomed the next generation of pack alphas and corporate executives. The deadline for late, anonymous rogue applications was in 2 days. "I'm not running anymore," Leo said, turning back to his mother. The boy who had wiped motor oil from his face hours ago was gone. In his place stood an alpha who had just realized his birthright had been stolen. "Declan Sterling threw you away because you were a liability. He thought he secured his legacy." Leo slammed the laptop shut. "I'm going to Aspen. I'm going to enroll in his academy. I'm going to stand in his boardroom, look him in his ice-blue eyes, and take every single thing he loves." The iron gates of the Sterling Academy in Aspen, Colorado, were forged to look like intertwined briars, an ancient symbol of pack protection. Behind them lay a sprawling, state-of-the-art campus of glass and black steel, nestled against the snow-capped peaks of the Rockies. This was the breeding ground for the werewolf elite future alphas, betas, and corporate titans who would run the world's logistics, real estate, and private security firms. Leo Miller arrived in a battered 2004 Honda Civic, a stark contrast to the fleet of Aston Martins, Porsches, and custom Range Rovers in the student lot. He stepped out into the biting cold, wearing a simple canvas jacket, his cheap duffel bag slung over one broad shoulder. He had bypassed the traditional pack lineage requirements by applying through a highly obscure, heavily guarded loophole, the Sovereign Rogue Scholarship. It was a program designed to absorb extraordinarily gifted wolves who had no pack affiliation, turning them into loyal corporate assets. Leo's perfect aptitude scores and jaw-dropping physical metrics had left the admissions board no choice but to accept him. He had registered simply as Leo Miller, a rogue from the Pacific Northwest. He knew the surname Miller was common enough in the human world to not immediately trigger alarm bells, but familiar enough to perhaps plant a subconscious seed of unease in the right minds. His first week was a masterclass in psychological restraint. The academy was steeped in rigid hierarchy. The scent of old money and purebred arrogance hung heavy in the air, dominated by two distinct auras, Asher and Brody Sterling. Asher, the 19-year-old heir apparent, was a mirror image of Victoria Croft. He had her aristocratic cheekbones, her dark hair, and her casual cruelty. He walked through the halls like a god among mortals, flanked by sycophants. Brody, a year younger, was the muscle of volatile, heavily muscled bruiser who served as Asher's personal enforcer. Leo watched them from the periphery, his expression an impenetrable mask. He attended classes in macroeconomics, pack law, and supply chain management, absorbing the inner workings of his father's empire. But it was in the advanced combat and strategy seminar that the shadows finally began to part. The combat arena was a massive, subterranean amphitheater lined with reinforced titanium mesh. Instructor Harrison Kensington, a scarred veteran beta who had served as Declan Sterling's master-at-arms, oversaw the sparring. The objective was dominance not just physical, but psychological. "We do not fight like street dogs," Harrison barked, pacing the mat as 30 elite students stood at attention. "A Sterling wolf fights with calculation. You break the enemy's structure before you break their bones." Asher stepped onto the center mat, casually unbuttoning his tailored cuffs. He had already dispatched 3 challengers with effortless, brutal efficiency, utilizing his dense alpha-blooded aura to force them into submission before the first punch was even thrown. He scanned the room, his dark eyes landing on the tall, silent stranger in the back. "The charity case," Asher sneered, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "Let's see if the rogue program is a waste of pack funds. Step up, Miller." The room went dead silent. A rogue challenging the heir was tantamount to a death wish. Leo didn't hesitate. He stepped onto the mat, his movements fluid and relaxed. He wore standard-issue gray sweatpants and a tight black t-shirt that did nothing to hide the heavy coiled muscle of his torso. As he approached, Asher immediately flared his aura, a heavy, suffocating wave of dominance meant to force Leo to bare his neck. Leo didn't even blink. He had spent his entire life suppressing a raw, ancient alpha power that dwarfed Asher's spoiled, untested energy. He kept his own scent tightly locked down, projecting nothing but the terrifyingly calm silence of a void. "You should yield, rogue," Asher whispered, insulted by Leo's lack of reaction. "I'll break your jaw." "Try," Leo replied, his voice a low, vibrating rumble that made the hairs on the back of Harrison Kensington's neck stand up. Asher lunged, shifting half his face into his wolf form to extend his fangs, swinging a devastating right hook. Leo didn't shift. He didn't use his claws. Relying entirely on the brutal, mechanical efficiency of street survival, Leo sidestepped the blow by a fraction of an inch, grabbed Asher's extended arm, and used the air's own momentum against him. With a sickening crack, Leo dislocated Asher's shoulder, sweeping his legs out from under him. Before Asher could even roar in pain, Leo was on top of him, his knee pressed directly into Asher's windpipe, completely neutralizing the air's airflow. The entire arena gasped. Brody surged forward with a snarl, but Harrison Kensington snapped a riding crop against the metal grating. "Hold your position, Brody. The match is legitimate." Beneath Leo, Asher thrashed, his dark eyes wide with panic and humiliation. He tried to push his alpha aura onto Leo again, but it shattered against Leo's mental wall like glass against a vault door. Leo leaned down, his face inches from Asher's. For a microsecond, Leo let his control slip. His eyes bled from hazel into a blazing, luminescent ice blue. Asher froze, a primal, bone-deep terror freezing his blood. He felt it the true, undeniable weight of a king. "Yield," Leo commanded softly. It wasn't a request. It was a physical law. Asher tapped the mat frantically. Leo released him instantly, standing up and smoothing his shirt as if he had just finished folding laundry. He didn't gloat. He didn't look at the stunned faces of his peers. He simply walked off the mat. Harrison Kensington watched the boy walk away, his mind racing. He had seen that exact fighting stance, that ruthless, calculating calm, and those piercing ice-blue eyes only once before 20 years ago, in a young Declan Sterling, 30 miles away, in the glass-enclosed penthouse boardroom of Sterling Enterprises. Alpha Declan Sterling rubbed his temples, a dull, throbbing headache building behind his eyes. At 42, Declan was a titan of industry, a billionaire many times over, but the crown of the Alpha was heavy, and the gold was tarnishing. Sitting across from him was his wife, Victoria Croft, dressed in an immaculate white Dior suit. She looked less like a mate and more like a hostile corporate raider. Beside her sat her brother, Dominic Croft, the Alpha of the European Syndicate. "The Q3 projections for the Seattle port expansions are unacceptable, Declan," Dominic drawled, swirling a glass of scotch. "The Croft family invested heavily in your West Coast logistics. If you cannot secure the territory from the local rogue factions, we will move our enforcers in and do it for you." "The Sterling Pact does not need Croft enforcers operating on our soil," Declan growled, his alpha aura flaring in a warning that rattled the crystal glasses on the mahogany table. "The West Coast is secure." "Is it?" Victoria interjected, her voice laced with venom. "Reports from Adrian say he was humiliated by a single, unidentified rogue in Portland last month. A rogue with an alpha aura. You are losing your grip, Declan. If Asher is not officially sworn in as acting VP of Logistics on his 20th birthday next month, the board will call for a vote of no confidence." Declan's jaw clenched. The marriage to Victoria had been a political necessity that had slowly morphed into a cage. He had secured his empire, but he had surrounded himself with vipers. He trusted no one in this room. And in his darkest, most quiet moments when the whiskey ran low and the nights ran long, the scent of vanilla and old paper would haunt his memories, a ghost of the only woman who had ever looked at him without wanting his crown. He had killed that part of his soul for this boardroom. And now, the boardroom was trying to eat him alive. "Asher will be ready," Declan said coldly, ending the meeting. Meanwhile, deep in the subterranean server rooms of the Sterling building, Leo Miller was already dismantling them, thanks to his peerless academic performance and the quiet recommendation of Harrison Kensington. Leo had secured a coveted winter internship at Sterling Enterprises. While the other interns were fetching coffee for executives, Leo had volunteered for the grueling, unglamorous data migration project in the IT department. It was the perfect vantage point. Leo was a mechanic at heart. He knew how to take things apart. Sitting in the glow of 3 monitors, Leo utilized a series of ghost protocols he had coded himself, bypassing the pack's cybersecurity firewalls. He wasn't looking for pack secrets, he was following the money. Within 2 weeks, Leo found the rot. Victoria Croft wasn't just pressuring Declan for power. She was actively bleeding the Sterling pack dry. Leo traced millions of dollars funneled from the pack's charity foundations and pension funds into offshore shell companies owned by the DuPont Consortium, a known front for the Croft family's black market operations. Victoria was financing a private army right under Declan's nose, preparing for a hostile coup if Declan refused to hand the Alpha title to Asher. Leo downloaded the encrypted ledgers onto a heavy, silver flash drive. He didn't just have a weapon to destroy Victoria now. He had the leverage to bring the entire Sterling Empire to its knees. It was 9 p.m. on a Friday when Leo finally packed up his things. The executive floors were mostly deserted. He stepped into the private glass elevator, pressing the button for the lobby. The doors were about to slide shut when a large hand caught the frame. The doors reopened, and Declan Sterling stepped inside. The air in the enclosed space instantly changed. Declan was imposing, radiating the heavy, pine and snow scent of a ruling alpha. Leo's inner wolf slammed against his ribs, howling a complex mixture of blood recognition, territorial challenge, and 18 years of suppressed agony. Leo locked his aura down so tight it caused a physical ache in his temples. He kept his head bowed slightly, playing the role of the invisible intern. The elevator began its descent. The silence was thick, humming with the vibration of the cables. Declan glanced at the young man beside him. He noticed the cheap canvas jacket, out of place in the billionaire's tower. But then, his heightened senses caught something else. A scent. It was buried deep under layers of engine oil and cheap soap. A faint, almost imperceptible trace of something fiercely familiar. "You're working late," Declan noted, his deep voice breaking the silence. "Data migration doesn't sleep, sir," Leo replied evenly, staring at the floor indicator. Declan frowned. The voice. The timbre was jarringly resonant, vibrating at the exact frequency of his own. Declan shifted his stance, turning slightly to look fully at the boy. "Look at me, son." Leo slowly turned his head. He raised his chin, allowing the harsh, fluorescent light of the elevator to illuminate his face. He met the Alpha's gaze directly. Declan stopped breathing. The leather portfolio in his hand slipped, hitting the floor with a loud slap. He was staring into a mirror that reflected a ghost. The jawline, the broad shoulders, the dark, messy hair. But it was the eyes, those piercing, luminescent ice-blue eyes, inherited through centuries of the Sterling bloodline. "Who?" Declan's voice cracked, the Alpha facade completely crumbling. His heart pounded violently against his ribs. "What is your name?" Leo looked at the man who had abandoned his mother to starve. He felt no warmth. He felt no desire for a father's embrace. He felt only the cold, metallic weight of the silver flash drive in his pocket and the impending fall of a king. "My name is Leo," he said, his voice dropping into a soft, deadly calm. "Leo Miller." Declan staggered back against the glass wall of the elevator, the color draining from his face as the name Miller struck him like a physical blow. The elevator dinged, the doors sliding open to the empty, marble-floored lobby. Leo picked up Declan's dropped portfolio, politely handed it back to the trembling billionaire, and walked out into the winter night, leaving the Alpha of the Aspen pack suffocating in his own realization. Declan Sterling did not go home that night. Long after the glass elevator deposited Leo Miller into the lobby, the Alpha of the Aspen pack remained locked in his penthouse office. The heavy oak doors were sealed shut, the security protocols engaged, and the blinds drawn tight against the glittering, snow-dusted skyline of the ski town. He sat behind his massive mahogany desk, a glass of neat Macallan 50-year-old scotch untouched by his right hand. Leo Miller. The name echoed in the cavernous room, striking like the tolling of a funeral bell. Declan's hands, usually steady enough to sign billion-dollar acquisition deals without a tremor, shook violently as he typed the name into the Sterling Academy's private database. The profile loaded instantly. There was a standard headshot. Declan stared at the screen, his lungs burning as if he had forgotten how to breathe. Looking at the photograph was like staring into a time machine. The boy had Sadie's soft, determined mouth, but the rest of him, the heavy, dark brows, the sharp, aristocratic cut of his jaw, and those terrifyingly cold, ice-blue eyes was entirely Sterling. He was the ghost of Declan's own youth, resurrected and sitting in his IT department. He clicked on the boy's admission file. Sovereign Rogue Scholarship. Origin: Portland, Oregon. 18 years ago, Gideon Shaw, Declan's intensely loyal head of personal security, had reported that Sadie's Greyhound bus had terminated in Portland. Declan had ordered Gideon to stop tracking her after that, out of a cowardly mix of guilt and a desperate need to pretend the rejection hadn't torn his own soul in half. Declan picked up his encrypted cell phone and dialed. It rang only once. "Alpha," Gideon answered, his voice gravelly and alert despite the late hour. "Gideon, I need you in my office. Now. And pull every piece of security footage from the Academy's combat arena over the last 3 weeks. Bring the raw files on a hard drive. No network transfers." 20 minutes later, Gideon, a massive, battle-scarred beta in a tailored charcoal suit, stood before Declan's desk. He plugged the drive into a secure monitor. "What are we looking for, sir?" Gideon asked, sensing the frantic, suffocating scent of his Alpha's distress. "Just play the footage of the advanced sparring seminars. Harrison Kensington's class." Gideon clicked through the files until he found the match from 2 weeks prior. The screen illuminated with the subterranean arena. Declan watched as Asher, his officially recognized heir, swaggered onto the mat. And then he saw him. Leo. The boy moved with a predatory, liquid grace that couldn't be taught in any academy. He moved like a born apex predator. Declan watched the brief, brutal exchange. He saw Asher flare his aura, and he saw Leo absorb it as if it were nothing more than a light breeze. He watched, mesmerized and horrified, as Leo dismantled Asher in 3 seconds flat, pinning the heir to the mat without shifting a single muscle into wolf form. Even through the grainy security footage, Declan could see the moment Leo's eyes flashed ice blue. He saw Asher tap the mat in absolute primal terror. "Goddess above," Gideon whispered, taking a step back from the monitor. He looked at Declan, his eyes wide. "Alpha, that boy, his combat stance, his eyes, he looks exactly like—" "He is," Declan said, his voice breaking, the absolute certainty crashing down on him. "He's my son, Gideon. He's my firstborn. Sadie was pregnant when I banished her." The silence in the office was deafening. The implications were catastrophic. In werewolf lore, the firstborn of an alpha line, especially one born of a true fated mate, possessed an ancestral power that a politically arranged offspring could never hope to match. By pack law, if Leo's lineage was proven, Asher's claim to the Empire was entirely null and void. "What are your orders, Alpha?" Gideon asked, his hand instinctively resting on the hilt of the silver-plated tactical knife at his belt. "If Victoria finds out about this boy, she will have him slaughtered before sunrise. You know the Croft family's methods." "She won't find out," Declan snarled, his inner wolf surging forward to protect his newly discovered blood. "Put a protective detail on Leo. Invisible. He doesn't know they're there. I want a perimeter around his apartment, his car, his classrooms. If a Croft enforcer even breathes in his direction, break their neck." But Declan was underestimating the viper sleeping in his own den. Miles away at the Sterling estate, Victoria Croft paced the length of her opulent, marble-floored dressing room. She wore a silk robe, her sharp features twisted in fury. She had felt the shift in Declan's aura the moment he returned home near dawn. He smelled of old scotch, panic, and something else, a profound, devastating sorrow. He had locked himself in the guest wing without speaking a word to her. Victoria picked up her phone and dialed her brother Dominic in London. "Declan is stalling," she hissed into the receiver. "The paperwork for Asher's vice presidency remains unsigned on his desk. He's distracted. Something happened at the corporate office tonight. Find out what it is," Dominic's smooth, heavily accented voice replied over the line. "Our European investors are growing impatient. The West Coast ports need to be under Asher's direct control by the Winter Solstice Gala next week, or we pull our capital and launch the hostile takeover. We will not let a weak alpha cost us billions." Victoria hung up. She walked to her vanity and pressed a hidden button beneath the mahogany wood. A hidden door in the paneling slid open, revealing her personal fixer, Adrian, the same hulking enforcer who had been humiliated in a Portland auto shop weeks prior. "Adrian," Victoria commanded, her voice like cracking ice. Declan spent the evening on the executive floor. Find out exactly who was in the building with him. Pull the badge logs. "I want to know who is whispering in my husband's ear." Adrian bowed his head. "Consider it done, Luna." Leo Miller did not sleep. While Declan Sterling was having an existential crisis in a penthouse, Leo was sitting at a Formica table in his cheap, rented off-campus apartment, staring at a laptop screen. The encrypted files he had stolen from the Sterling servers were completely deciphered, laying bare the rotting foundation of Victoria Croft's criminal enterprise. He had the bank routing numbers, the shell company registrations in the Cayman Islands, and the black market arms invoices. Victoria wasn't just skimming from the sterling pack. She was actively funding an illicit mercenary army to stage a coup against her own husband. Leo took a sip of black coffee, his ice-blue eyes reflecting the harsh glare of the screen. He inserted the silver flash drive and set up a dead man switch. If he didn't log into this specific server every 24 hours, the files would automatically mass email to every pack elder, every corporate board member, and the supernatural investigative branch of the FBI. He was bulletproof. But Leo didn't just want to expose Victoria. He wanted to destroy the entire system that had allowed a woman like her to thrive while his mother scrubbed diner floors. The next morning, the academy was buzzing with tension. Word of Asher's humiliating defeat in the combat arena had leaked, spreading like wildfire among the elite students. The natural order had been violently disrupted, and the pack hierarchy was vibrating with unease. Leo walked across the frost-covered courtyard toward the library, his canvas jacket zipped against the biting wind. He was halfway across the quad when his path was blocked by a wall of heavy muscle. Brody Sterling, Asher's volatile younger brother, stood glaring at him, flanked by 4 other purebred alpha candidates. "Rogue," Brody spat, the word dripping with venom. "You think you're untouchable because you got a lucky shot on my brother? You don't belong here. You smell like a stray." Leo stopped. He didn't tense his muscles. He simply let his hands rest casually in his pockets. A crowd was quickly forming. Dozens of future pack leaders, corporate heirs, and socialites stopped in their tracks, forming a wide circle. "Step aside, Brody," Leo said, his voice flat, completely devoid of intimidation or fear. It was an alpha command, wrapped in conversational velvet. Brody bristled, his eyes flashing yellow as his wolf pushed against his skin. "Or what? You'll try that parlor trick on me? I challenge you, Miller, right here, by pack law," a formal challenge in the public square. Brody began to shift. His bones cracked audibly, his jaw elongating, thick gray fur erupting along his forearms as his hands turned into massive, lethal claws. The crowd gasped, stepping back. A partial shift in the courtyard was a severe violation of Academy rules, but Brody was the Alpha's son. Rules did not apply to him. Leo sighed. It was a sound of profound boredom. As Brody lunged, a monstrous roar tearing from his throat, Leo finally stopped suppressing his aura. He didn't shift. He didn't even take his hands out of his pockets. He simply released the invisible, crushing weight of his true bloodline. The air in the courtyard literally shimmered. A shockwave of pure, ancient alpha dominance exploded outward from Leo's center. It was so heavy, so overwhelmingly ancient and pure, that several beta students in the crowd instantly dropped to their knees, their hands clutching their chests, gasping for air. Brody hit the invisible wall of Leo's aura and collapsed mid-stride. The pressure slammed him into the cobblestones. His partial shift reversed itself violently, his body forcibly returning to its human state, under the sheer absolute command of a superior king. Brody lay on the freezing ground, choking, unable to lift his head, his nose bleeding from the pressure. Leo walked forward, stepping over Brody's twitching form without a downward glance. He looked at the 4 purebred alphas who had flanked Brody. They were trembling, their eyes locked on Leo's face, their wolves completely subjugated. "If any of you block my path again," Leo said quietly, the sound carrying across the dead silent courtyard, "I won't just bruise your pride, I will break your spine. Am I understood?" The 4 alphas lowered their heads in simultaneous, involuntary submission, baring their necks. From a 3rd-floor window overlooking the courtyard, Victoria Croft watched the entire display. Her perfectly manicured fingernails dug into the oak windowsill so hard they drew blood. Beside her stood Adrian, holding a printed sheet of the IT department's badge logs. "The intern who was with Declan last night," Adrian rasped, his eyes wide as he watched the boy in the courtyard dominate the pack's strongest enforcers without lifting a finger. "His name is Leo Miller. Luna, I recognize him. I didn't see it before because the context was wrong. That's the mechanic from Portland, the rogue who threw me across the lot." Victoria's blood turned to ice. Miller, the name of the pathetic beta archivist Declan had been obsessed with before their marriage. Portland, the city where Gideon Shaw had lost track of her. And the boy 18 years old. The math was sickeningly perfect. She looked back down at the courtyard. She saw the way the boy stood, the broad shoulders, the terrifying, effortless command over the wolves around him. He wasn't just a rogue. He was the true-born heir to the Sterling Empire. "He knows," Victoria whispered, panic finally slicing through her iron facade. "Declan knows. That's why he won't sign Asher's papers. He's going to legitimize the bastard." She turned to Adrian, her eyes black with murderous intent. The Winter Solstice Gala was in exactly 3 days. It was the biggest event of the year, where all the board members, pack elders, and European investors would gather in the grand ballroom of the Sterling estate. "I want a tactical team," Victoria ordered, her voice trembling with barely contained hysteria. "Not pack enforcers. Bring in the Silver Vanguard mercenaries from Geneva. I want that boy dead before the gala. I want his heart cut out and brought to me in a box. And if you fail, Adrian, I will feed you to my brother's hounds." But as Adrian rushed out to make the calls, Leo was already 2 steps ahead. He walked into the library, pulled out his encrypted phone, and dialed a number he hadn't called since he left Oregon. "Mom," Leo said softly when Sadie answered, her voice fraught with worry. "Leo, are you okay? I've been having terrible nightmares." "I'm fine," Leo replied, looking out the window toward the towering peaks of the mountains. "But I need you to pack a bag. I've bought you a first-class ticket to Aspen. The flight leaves in 3 hours. There will be a private car waiting for you." "Aspen?" "Leo, no. If Declan sees me, if Victoria finds out—" "Victoria is already finished," Leo interrupted, his voice hardening into the undeniable tone of an alpha who had already won the war. "It's time for you to stop running, Mom. It's time for us to take back exactly what they owe us." The Winter Solstice Gala was the undisputed pinnacle of werewolf high society, held in the sprawling, gilded grand ballroom of the street, Regis Aspen Resort. It was a night where billion-dollar mergers were whispered over crystal flutes of Dom Perignon, and pack alliances were sealed in blood and ink. Victoria Croft held court near the ice sculptures, draped in a custom emerald gown that caught the light like a serpent's scales. Beside her stood her brother, Dominic, and the elite European investors. She smiled, sipping her champagne, projecting absolute victory. By midnight, Declan would be forced by the pack elders to officially name Asher the vice president of logistics, effectively surrendering the final key to the Sterling Empire. But beneath her diamond-crusted exterior, Victoria was counting the seconds. She had received a text from the Silver Vanguard mercenaries 10 minutes ago. Target acquired in the resort's subterranean wine cellar, moving to eliminate. Down in the cavernous, dimly lit wine cellar of the Street Regis, the air was thick with the scent of oak, vintage Bordeaux, and ozone. 3 highly trained mercenaries, clad in tactical Kevlar and armed with silver-laced concussive rifles, moved silently through the towering racks of bottles. They had tracked Leo Miller here, intending to leave his body in a frozen ravine before the first course was served upstairs. They severely underestimated the monster they were hunting. Leo didn't run. He didn't hide. He waited in the shadows of the oldest vintages, his heart beating at a terrifyingly slow, calculated rhythm. When the lead mercenary stepped past a rack of Pinot Noir, Leo struck. He didn't use a weapon. He reached out, his hand locking onto the man's tactical vest, and hurled him through a solid oak wine rack with the force of a freight train. Wood splintered, and thousands of dollars of red wine exploded into the air like blood. The other 2 spun around, raising their rifles. Leo's eyes ignited into a blinding, luminescent ice blue. He let his alpha aura drop like an anvil. The sheer, suffocating pressure of his dominance paralyzed the human mercenaries, their nervous systems short-circuiting under the weight of an apex predator. In 2 fluid, brutal motions, Leo disarmed them and knocked them unconscious. He adjusted the cuffs of his immaculate, tailor-made charcoal suit purchased that very morning, using funds he had cleanly siphoned from Victoria's own offshore slush fund. He wiped a single drop of wine from his lapel, stepped over the bodies, and made his way to the elevators. It was time to join the party. Upstairs, a hush fell over the grand ballroom as Alpha Declan Sterling took the stage. He looked exhausted, the shadows under his eyes stark against the harsh spotlight. The pack elders, seated at the front tables, watched him with expectant, hawkish eyes. Honored elders, esteemed guests, and members of the Sterling pack, Declan began, his deep voice echoing through the sound system. He gripped the edges of the podium, his knuckles white. He looked toward Victoria, who gave him a chilling, victorious nod. "Tonight, we gather to secure the future of our empire. It has been proposed that my son, Asher—" Declan choked on the words. His inner wolf clawed at his chest, screaming in agony at the betrayal of his true bloodline. Before he could force the rest of the sentence out, the massive mahogany double doors at the back of the ballroom slammed open with a deafening crack. The string quartet abruptly stopped playing. 500 heads turned simultaneously. Leo Miller strode into the ballroom. He was a vision of terrifying, aristocratic authority. He didn't walk like a rogue or a charity case. He walked like he owned the building, the pack, and every soul inside it. He dragged something behind him, the unconscious, battered body of Adrian, Victoria's chief enforcer, whom Leo had intercepted in the lobby. With a casual flick of his wrist, Leo tossed Adrian's massive body onto the polished marble floor at the foot of the elders' table. "Apologies for the interruption," Leo's voice boomed, projecting effortlessly across the vast space without the need for a microphone. "But I believe the pack elders and the independent auditors from KPMG sitting at table 4 will want to see tonight's real presentation." Victoria's face drained of all color. The champagne flute slipped from her hand, shattering against the marble. "Guards!" she shrieked, her poised facade completely disintegrating. "Kill him. He's a rogue assassin." "Stand down," Declan roared, his own alpha aura exploding outward, freezing the security detail in their tracks. He stepped out from behind the podium, his ice-blue eyes locked entirely on Leo. Leo pulled a small silver remote from his pocket and pressed a button. He had hacked the Street Regis AV system an hour prior. The massive digital screens flanking the stage, meant to show the Sterling corporate logo, suddenly flickered. They illuminated with irrefutable, damning evidence. Bank ledgers, encrypted emails, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, and invoices for black market weaponry. "For the past 5 years," Leo announced, his voice ringing with absolute command, "Victoria Croft has been embezzling hundreds of millions of dollars from the Sterling Pack pension funds and charitable trusts. She has used this money to fund a private mercenary army, the DuPont Consortium, with the express intent of staging a hostile coup against Alpha Declan Sterling." The ballroom erupted into chaos. The pack elders shot to their feet, their eyes flashing with feral outrage. The KPMG auditors scrambled to look at the screen, their faces pale as they realized the depth of the fraud. Dominic Croft stepped away from his sister, his face a mask of fury and self-preservation. "Victoria, you fool," he hissed. "It's a lie," Asher screamed, shifting his hands into massive claws and lunging at Leo from the side of the stage. "I'll rip your throat out, you bastard!" Leo didn't even turn his head. As Asher closed the distance, Leo simply flared his raw, ancestral dominance. The physical force of Leo's aura hit Asher like a concrete wall, dropping the 19-year-old heir to his knees instantly, gasping for breath, completely subjugated by a true king. "I am not finished," Leo said softly, though the entire room heard him. He looked directly at the pack elders. "By pack law, an alpha's empire cannot be inherited by a traitor's blood, and it certainly cannot be inherited by a second-born son." The silence that followed was absolute. From the open doors at the back of the room, the sharp, rhythmic click of heels echoed. The crowd parted instinctively as Sadie Miller walked into the light. She was no longer the frightened 19-year-old girl shivering in a rain-soaked coat, dressed in a stunning, midnight blue silk gown. Her hair falling in elegant waves, Sadie radiated a quiet, unbreakable dignity. She walked straight down the center aisle, her eyes locked on the man who had broken her heart 18 years ago. Declan staggered back, clutching his chest. Tears welled in his eyes as the scent of vanilla and old paper flooded his senses, hitting him with the force of a physical blow. "Sadie," he choked out, falling to his knees right there on the stage. The alpha of the Aspen pack completely surrendering to the crushing weight of his life's greatest regret. "Sadie, my mate." Sadie stopped beside her son. She looked down at Declan, her expression a mixture of profound sorrow and absolute closure. "I didn't come here for an apology, Declan," she said softly. "I came here to watch my son take back what you stole from him." Leo stepped forward. He stood over Declan, looking down at his biological father with eyes as cold as a winter storm. "My name is Leo Miller," he addressed the pack elders. "I am the firstborn son of Alpha Declan Sterling and his true fated mate, Sadie. I possess the unbroken Alpha bloodline. And as of tonight, I am claiming my birthright." The eldest pack member, a silver-haired man named Thorne, stepped forward, his eyes wide as he felt the crushing, undeniable weight of Leo's aura. He looked at the screens, at Victoria, who was now surrounded by pack enforcers, and finally at Declan, who was still kneeling before Sadie. Slowly, Thorne bowed his head, baring his neck. "The blood does not lie," the elder proclaimed. Long live the Alpha. One by one, the investors, the elite students, the guards, and finally the elders dropped to one knee. Leo stood tall amidst the sea of bowed heads, his mother safely by his side, as the shadows of the past were finally burned away by the dawn of a new reign. The Alpha abandoned his pregnant mate. Now the heir he never knew is coming for the throne is a tale of survival, patience, and the undeniable pull of destiny. It strips away the traditional woodland werewolf tropes and thrusts primal pack politics into the ruthless, high-stakes world of corporate billionaires and boardroom espionage. Sadie's journey from a discarded, heartbroken beta to a mother who raised a king in the shadows highlights the fierce, unbreakable nature of maternal love. Meanwhile, Leo's calculated dismantling of Victoria Croft's empire proves that true alpha power isn't born from cruelty or wealth, but from discipline, loyalty, and an unyielding sense of justice. Ultimately, the story serves as a thrilling reminder that the past can never truly be buried, and a crown built on betrayal will always, inevitably, fall to the rightful heir.